if you're a person trained in religion like me, you understand when things turn to truthiness from broader metaphoric truths, and you have to be honest about it, or you risk one of the main risks of embracing myths, which is as soon as someone discovers that the myth is not true, everything you've built on it is problematic. If you hang your hat on this is literally fundamentally true in that way, then when someone discovers that it ain't so, the all or nothing equation becomes nothing. Then they choose nothing.
What is going on, everybody? 'Tis I, the enigma of the gun airwaves, Miyanovich, welcoming you to Season 3 of the Liberal Gun Owner's Lens podcast, where unprecedented perspectives are packed into the cargo hold for the LGO Lens spaceship Voyagio.
That's fucking Italian.
Don't believe that evolution is possible with guns and public safety in America? It's already happening, y'all. Minds are evolving. Think guns versus public safety is the only game in town, do ya? Think culture war is the big boss, do ya? Then keep your ass in the past. Everyone else, all aboard! Hello, everybody. Welcome again to another episode of the Liberal Gun Owner's Lens podcast. Today, I am glad to be here. I am glad that you are back. And this is another one of these instances where I have an interview that I've done with somebody that I am particularly excited about. Perhaps the listeners out there will not understand why it is that I am excited about this, but we reach a level of depth sometimes here with our discussions that is unprecedented, certainly in the world of guns. Most all of the discussions that happen on this podcast are not happening anywhere else in the world, certainly not in the world of guns. And today's discussion with Rabbi Hillel Norry is another one of these discussions. I'm not going to go into Hillel's bio. Hillel has been on the show multiple times. You can Google Rabbi Hillel Norry and find out what Hillel's background is. So I don't want to waste time there. But I do want to say this. Today we're discussing myth, law, religion, and human behavior, because all of these things are related. This year, as you know, my focus is to finish up the first section of what we call the LGO Lens law pillar, and it will be dealing with the relationship between myth, the law, and human behavior. Why religion is important, and why this discussion with Hillel is important, is because the patterns that are inside the rule of law and the legal system are absolutely related to the patterns that come from humans and their relationship to various religions, particularly the Abrahamic religions of the West. Most people, when they think of the law, well, it depends, I guess, on who the person is. But many people believe that the law is a stoic, rational, Vulcan-like system of processing that deals with facts and pure information, and that is separated out from something that could be seen as, certainly by liberals, as irrational as religion. But the reality is, all of our institutions in the United States of America, most all of them share an imprint from our previous influences with religion and the place that it took in Western history. Not only that, but these institutions and the way that we do things are also imprinted by our relationship to religion when we were hunter-gatherers for 99% of the time on this planet. Those religions, of course, being much more primitive. So you are going to notice that we talk a lot about religion, and you're going to be like, I thought this was a guns podcast, and I thought Randy was talking about the law this year. Well, religion has everything to do with the foundational patterns of the rule of law. It has everything to do with it. And the patterns that we had with being a highly religious civilization at one point transferred over when we started this whole general separation of church and state. When in Europe, we decided that there was going to be this thing called state sovereignty, where we were going to switch over into a reality where religious empires were not the last word in what happened in different regions. State sovereignty basically is the statement that this region, this bounded region, has a personality and an incorporation of its own, and that personality and that incorporation has dominion over the people inside of the borders. While on paper, that pattern did separate itself from the previous pattern, which would be like a religious empire, or an empire that was driven by a core religion. While there's a difference there, the reality is supremacy of the state is basically just a substitute for the supremacy of a religion and the supremacy of God's rule, the rule of a supreme being. That pattern just switched over from a supreme being to this incorporated region and the people that run it. Okay. And this means, and it is absolutely observable, that within the rule of law, you have the same kind of patterns that you had in situations where religion and law and dictates from religious texts and religious logic and religious thinking, these patterns transferred over into the rule of law, absolutely. And they are still present inside of the rule of law today. They're still present inside of our courts. And so there's a transfer of a general mythology of a supreme force that goes from religion over to the state. And as such, there is absolutely a subconscious, or sometimes in a spooky fashion, a conscious worship of this supreme power. There is a general mythology that I call the myth of law's supremacy, which is absolutely foundational to the presence of doing things legally in the United States of America. Whether that's your policy making for the thing that you want to happen to leverage progress in society, or whether it's punishing criminals, whatever it is that your viewpoint is, or whatever it is that your desire is with the law, it is still attached to the myth of law's supremacy. And that is basically, there is some kind of a daddy up above us who has the power to do a number of things or accomplish a number of things. And the important part of this mythology is that we would never be able to make it or be decent people without it. Part of that is kind of true, but part of it is enormously not true. And so Hillel and I are talking about religion because of the pattern that transfers over into the legal reality. So it is very, very important that you remember that today, that when you hear us talking about religion, what we're really talking about is human institutions and the way that humans do desire to have this power above them to give them guidance or to tell them what to do or to punish the other people that are doing things that we don't like. Within this phenomenon is this myth that it is, number one, entirely needed, and number two, it has absolute power or phenomenal power over all the things that happen in our reality. That is part of the myth. In reality, it doesn't matter what the institution is that you're looking at, whether it's the medical industry, whether it's the education industry, whether it's government, whether it's religion, they all have a myth of supremacy. And they are all stating in one way or another, we are the supreme force in regards to this phenomenon, and you absolutely need us in order to do this. And we are absolutely effective in our intent. This is the part of the various myths of supremacy, and all of them are half bullshit. They're kind of true, like partially true, but half of it is bullshit. And so in order for us to understand the law this year, what we really need to understand is the myth that underlays the presence of the rule of law in the legal system. And that is the myth of law's supremacy, that it has powers that it actually doesn't. So we need to get to the heart of that. And one of the best ways to get to the heart of that is to have this discussion with Hillel about this same phenomenon inside of religion. He's one of the very few religious thinkers that's capable of actually going here with me. You might think this is too much and it's not for you, but this is by far one of the most important conversations that I have had in life. And it certainly is one of the most important conversations that I've had on this podcast. If you want to understand why laws work or don't work, or why people believe certain things about laws, if you want to understand any of these things, you need to understand the various myths of supremacy associated with the law and all of our institutions. And there's no better way to start that than to talk about religion. So without further ado, please join me for this space-time fabric ripping conversation with Rabbi Hillel Norry. So the first thing I'll say is, Hillel Norry, welcome back to the Liberal Gun Owner's Lens podcast, man. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you, man. Great to be back.
So this year I am studying and researching and writing about the law. And I had an original direction that I was going to go in. And I'm still in that direction. I really wanted to talk about law and rules and human behavior and the realities of that, because as simple as everybody tries to make that seem, it is so not fucking simple whatsoever. But what erupted in the research is something I didn't see coming, and that is understanding fundamental mythology that is, once you look at the topic, overwhelmingly obvious that when you get to the law, there is fundamental mythology involved in it. So by mythology, I'm saying basically a narrative, a story that pulls people together in a collective effort to focus on belief. And like all mythologies, there is good truth in it. There's semi-decent truth in it. There's half-assed truth in it. There's truthiness. There's white lies. And then there's big-ass whoppers. But all of these things are in there to kind of gluttenize humans in a thing, right? In a collective effort. I didn't know how profound it was inside of the rule of law or connected to the rule of law. And it is. And I will be covering that in this research and writing. But of course, us being in the West, there is no law without religion. And they're very much so connected, whether people are aware of it or not, because we originally had, a long time ago, rules and laws as tribes. And these developed into rules and laws relative to belief, and then religion, and then the rule of law. So that is one of the reasons why you are here today, is we're going to talk about both myth and behavior, the behavior of following rules. Those are the things I'm really interested in picking your brain on. Excellent. So I want to read this to you. This is a theological theorist named Harold Barnes Kuhn. I don't know if you know about Kuhn, but he trained at Harvard theology. I guess they had the theological seminary, or they did at one point. So this is a great thing that I found by Kuhn, and I want to hear your thoughts. I'll just jump right in the middle. Underlying this and its theological application is some generalization concerning the word, in quotes, which seems to be regarded as a free-floating, transcendental entity, essentially incapable of being verbalized in more than the most transient sense. In other words, religious truth cannot be expected to lend itself to modes of expression which conform to the generally used norms of linguistic use. There are, of course, other root presuppositions which the theological method under discussion accepts and utilizes. Other procedural elements do, of course, belong to it. What is important is that the method as understood is underlain by isolatable myth elements. And then he goes on to talk about scholarship in theology. As one has aptly said, the assumption of a purely objective scholarship is itself the major myth of our time. So within that little hamburger, which had a lot of shit in there.
A lot.
Yes. So what's most interesting to me is in religion, we have myth. With religion, we have myth. And you're a rationalist, right? Who is a rabbi, but you're a rationalist. So I'm interested to hear, and we can go in any direction, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts about the relationship between story, myth, and religion, but also that whole realm of facts and maybe not facts and poorly interpreted facts or crazy make-em-ups inside of the myth, because I think all institutional myths have some crazy make-em-up somewhere in there.
Right.
What do you think about the fundamental relationship between religion and story and myth?
So I resonated strongly with that quote in a number of ways. There really is a lot there. And when he was talking about the meaning of certain words and how words are informed by those underlying mythologies that just have to be sort of accepted, very often in religious conversations, words they don't really lend themselves to easy definition. Like words like belief, right? That's one of those words that everyone says, are you a believer? Like if you say yes, do I really know anything more about you? Like, I really don't, um, so what do you mean by belief? Like, do you believe in God? Well, that has two words that, are not words that lend themselves easily in any way to that kind of easy definition, God and
Yeah.
belief, right? Like, I would say, yes, I do. And then someone else would say, yes, I do. And the two of us would mean completely different things. So those words are they're individually sensitive and understood, and they're communally sensitive and understood, right? In my community, if I say this, people know sort of what I mean,
Yeah.
right? So I appreciated that. And that there are words and concepts that if you are an insider to the system and to that civilization and to those ideas, those words and those laws by extension, make sense and you totally get it. But if you're an outsider, you want to know by which set of principles am I supposed to understand these things? What are the rules for the system? Like, I can buy in. Most legal systems are systems, and you have to buy into a set of rules. I think that's kind of what he means by there is no scholarship without a certain, mythology. Like, all of these domains, scholarship, law, religion, as intellectual and academic and pursuits that can be written about and talked about and philosophized about, all of them, you kind of have to buy into a set of basic principles of the system. Even classical Jewish practice took hermeneutic legal principles from Greek and Roman culture where they were immersed, and by extension from Islamic cultures where they were immersed in them. And so it's not like Jewish thinking and Jewish legal theory doesn't have rootedness in translatable hermeneutics, things that can be easily understood by other people. It does. And it's why there's a lot of overflow between Jewish ideas and ideals and practices and other legal systems, even secular legal systems. Things like don't steal, right? That pretty much everybody has in their legal system, but there are still, how we understand it, there's underlying assumptions and a set of assumptions that you have to buy into. And if you do buy into those, then it all kind of makes some sense. And again, it depends on what the individual means by saying, I accept the commandedness of this passage. I might mean something very, very different. The other thing I think he touches on here, and it's really where the rationalist and the academic come into more of a head-to-head confrontation with classical religious thinking. Because if you're a person trained in religion like me, you understand when things turn to truthiness from broader metaphoric truths, and you have to be honest about it, or you risk one of the main risks of embracing myths, which is as soon as someone discovers that the myth is not true, everything you've built on it is problematic. If you hang your hat on this is literally, fundamentally true in that way, then when someone discovers that it ain't so, the all or nothing equation becomes nothing. Then they choose nothing. If you have to believe that every word of Scripture was revealed by an unspeakable divinity in the Hebrew language on a specific date a long time ago, if that's what I have to believe in the authority and the truth of the Torah, then I'm going to have a really hard time, because I know a thing or two about the history of the book itself. And as soon as you know that, you can't have this fundamentalist view of the book. That's an inductive reasoning. That's part of what he was getting to in that quote. Like, there's things you just have to inductively accept. God wrote the Bible. I can say that, but if you know me, you know what I mean by that. And you know that I don't mean it literally. In fact, I'll say, I'm at the point in life where I just say it because, of course, it's true. And someone who's like, aha, see, he's a heretic. All they have is the inductive. Myth is the inductive. It's what you nurse on. It's the basic background language and background radiation of your universe. That's myth. But then there is deductive thinking, where you have to figure things out for yourself. And it's not enough for someone to just say, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Like, that's not enough. Now I need to know, well, what does that mean in all of its details? And I need deductive reasoning, where my experience and my understanding and my spirituality, psycho-spiritual self, is involved in understanding it. And those things might come into conflict. I might learn something which causes me to have to then challenge. And I often say, especially about things like belief and things like that, if the measure of your belief is how much you believe in something that's unbelievable, then we don't mean the same thing. If the measure of it is you have to believe this thing that is unbelievable, and the more unbelievable it is, the more you have to believe it. That just poses that if I don't believe it, I'm out. And there, I think, is one of the big powers of myth. Is myth is larger than literal truth. It allows for a lot more room, metaphoric truth, and in a way, all language, all God language, all Torah language, all the language we use to speak about things is metaphoric language. We're all speaking metaphorically about it, no matter which metaphor we choose. So I think there is the great power of myth. The weakness of myth is that when you shatter the myth, that's it. The whole thing is shattered.
Yeah.
But the strength of it is that it has room for more than a literal truth and an inductive acceptance.
Yeah, I look at it as myth is the great glue of human endeavor, because our great endeavors are simply a function of our outstanding and unprecedented capacity in nature to collect together. No other species has it. And so myth and story are this glue that enable this generalized superiority for our endeavors, whatever they may be. And then, of course, we translate those usually into some form of institution, but it's the glue. But the problem is that it's the glue. Like, it's just supposed to be the glue, and it proves itself to only being really good at being the glue. Beyond that, you need reason. You need a more, I'll use the term scientific, but you need a more mathematical understanding of existence and how to put things together and how to make shit and how to innovate and how to build your community and how to make the thing that makes the water come into the village. Like, you need the other for the other stuff. So when you have societies that reject that and just are entirely focused, or endeavors entirely focused on that glue as God, like it's like the belief is the God, the belief in the glue is God. It's probably highly subconscious. I just recognize it as the glue, and what seems to happen is generally we move forward in time, and the scientific framework that we live in, which we do, it's more and more scientific, maybe not great, but we're discovering more and more, we're understanding more and more. There's a gap between where the glue world puts us, like we're glued together and this is working, versus what the scientific framework is revealing to us. And when you just said the myth comes apart, throughout history, we're seeing this in different versions. The myth runs out and the actual reality takes over, and then we regenerate a new myth, and then so on and so forth. So do you see that gap also? And I will say that I will ask this also. I'm starting to see that gap now again. in big ways. Do you see that?
Yes, I do. And in some ways, that kind of a fundamentalism is really the enemy, no matter what it is. Like if the glue is so blinding, so intense that it completely obscures everything else and doesn't allow you to do those civilization building things, then it doesn't matter whether it's fundamentalism A or fundamentalism B. Their gluiness is the same. And look, in the Jewish religious practice framework, right? What's the whole purpose? What's the purpose of the commandments? Here you have all these things you're supposed to do and things you're supposed to not do. And if, in theory, like, what's the purpose? What's the reason that I'm doing all these things? Like, is it, you have to sort of admit this can't be just purely for God's entertainment, or God's, because it doesn't even make any sense that, the master of the world would care how I do some small little thing in my tiny little life in some small speck corner of the universe. That doesn't really even make religious sense. So the purpose has to be something more human and more personal. And the purpose of the story, like, why do I have to read these ancient stories? It can't be, again, just so that I know the story of Abraham. It has to be that something is derived from this, that these stories and these commandments, if I live them and tell them in community, they become the building blocks of a successful community. I mean, that's the goal. The purpose is that it's the construction of a better society. I become a better person, and my society becomes a better society, more holy, more just, more merciful, more compassionate, more centered and enlightened. But there's a few classic examples even, and I think it's gotten more and more complex as life gets more complicated, where if you follow all the rules, bad things happen. And where if you do the system and do exactly what the commandedness tells you, then it's not that a better society is created. And it's not just, well, I want to do something outside the system. It's that the society you create by following the rules might be negative, might be a bad society. You might create exactly the thing you say you don't want to create. And that sort of unintended consequence is a part of every system too. So there's always going to be an error factor and an imperfection in something. And I like to sometimes say, our ancestors knew some things that we don't know. I'm willing to accept that we have forgotten some very, very deep and profound, real underlying truths. But what is also true is we know things that they did not know. And that the state of human knowledge and consciousness is arguably better and more expansive than it has ever been before in human history. And so if that ends up making you confront aspects of your own philosophy in an uncomfortable way, so be it. We cannot come to the point where we say, I'm so willing to overlook what I know from my experience, not from inductive knowledge, but from what I have lived and learned in my experience. If I have to suspend that to such an extent, then, I can't do it. And sometimes you get like these religious people who are like, don't tell me about the problems. Like, I'm here to study math. Like, all I want to know is the science part. Like, I don't want to know the implications of the science. Like, actually, if you accept all that math, you kind of have to confront this other stuff and come to what I would call a more mature understanding of the possibilities of commandedness and observance and faith and belief.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about, I don't want the problems. I just want the other part. Because in my study, in my understanding that's happening, every institutional mythology must involve that which matters to the human ego most, which I would say that which matters to the glue factor the most. If your mythology isn't the best one on the block. It's really not a great glue. You have to believe that your thing is the thing better than the other things.
Right.
You have to believe that it is what I call the Prometheus of certainty. So we face the chaos of existence and nature. Our brains are in a constant state of anxiety over it. Low level subconscious are like massive. We are constantly there because we're natural beings. And we learned somehow that the most successful groups are the ones that aren't psychologically pinned down like animals by their fears and can get some brain space to innovate, to be fearless, to do new things, to branch out, to face the problems, to create. So we need something to tamp down psychologically the anxiety state. And my opinion is, after reviewing the material, is that this is what myth is doing. It is delivering the Prometheus of certainty. Some sky daddy is delivering this special ability to us, and we are the special confident ones. And this system that we are in is going to deliver us or give us the best route, or is going to be the perfect route, or whatever. So within the mythology, whether it's law, whether it's the government, right, education, universities and academia, there is an inherent, basically, we're the perfect ones, we're the best ones, we deliver the best goods, we always deliver, and our ideas are going to solve the problems. So don't you worry, because you're a part of that. There's some version of that in every myth, because it takes that initial brain state and tamps down the overwhelming fears that can come, and we desire it. So it's like a chicken or egg thing. Like, what created that? Did we create the institutions need to provide that? Because humans are obviously looking for some sky daddy or some daddy to make it all okay and to answer the things that we don't know how to answer. We're looking for it because we desire it. And so does that then create the institution, or is the institution just a reflection of people getting together and knowing that subconsciously and creating it? I don't know the answer to that. I just know that when you look at all institutions, there's an exchange there happening between the people need the daddy and the institutions need to provide the daddy. And part of the daddy projection is, I'm perfect. I've got it all handled. If you follow my ideas and behave, it's all going to go our way.
Well,
So good.
What you have is a marketing problem, and that is that that certainty is really, really attractive in a certain way. Like there's a craving for it almost, and that's sort of what I was talking about with the more unbelievable I can believe, right? Then in this crazy think. My faith is better than yours, because like I believe the truly unbelievable. I'm part of a small minority of people who has access to this truth that is the capital T truth. And who wouldn't want that? If you're going into the marketplace and over here is a guy selling you, hey, I have part of the truth. And over here is a guy saying, that guy is not real. I have the truth. I'm Torah true. And I believe it 100%. Oh, but what about this? And what about this? And what about this? Which should legitimately call you to question those fundamental beliefs. I have an answer for them all. There is no argument anywhere. There's no reality anywhere that you can bring to me to dissuade me from claiming the truth. And I'll tell you, people are attracted to that. They are willing to accept it, even though they know that they personally do not believe that way. But they want the mythology writer to think that way. They want their myth and the guru who creates it to give them that. And I'm over here saying, I only have part of the truth, which is honestly a much better position from my point of view. But it is a less marketable position because I'm offering possibility and he's collapsing all the possibilities into, if you just do it this way, then everything will be okay. And And that's tremendously appealing, tremendously. It's like, do you actually expect the legal scholar, the judge, the politician to stand up and say, the law can provide you with a safe highway, but it is essentially incapable of building a better society? That you have to do through your own interpersonal constructions, and we really cannot stop crime. Is that what you want them to say? Or do you want them to say, I'm tough on crime. I believe that more law will bring more law following. That's what people want to hear. They don't actually believe it, I think, but they seem to want to hear it.
We're in the complexity of the brain. The emotional part needs a thing. Perhaps the rational part needs a thing as well. But that's a good reminding the listeners here. We're talking about this today because of the law, the myth and the truthiness and the emotional needs. This is exactly what is fucking happening with the rule of law and law in the United States of America. And our business, both Hillel and I have varied interests, but part of our business is certainly guns. And we are at the nexus in the middle of it between guns and public safety. We live there. And so one of the things that we have to contend with is being liberals who have to stare at the Democratic Party, which we mostly are going to support because they mostly represent what we mostly believe. However, they stand up on the pulpit and just spin yarns about laws and gun crime. And they have the world's leading platform for crazy make-em-ups with what we're going to do about gun crimes. They're the world's leading myth spinner of laws having a maximized effect on prevention and deterrence for gun-related negatives. They're the world's leading myth spinner. And I see value, number one, in us breaking that down and saying, hold on, we're liberals. Hold on a second. Like, Jesus Christ. Like, okay, laws can help. Policy can help as a complement in a greater equation to which Hillel just elucidated. The greater equation is we've got to be constructive as people in everyday life. And then perhaps the law can give us some assistance in that, or we can partner with it. But this idea that these are the problems, we're going to sweep the streets clean. Mass shootings are going to stop if we just get rid of the AR-15. It's all bullshit. It's mythology. And then, so what's coming out of the paper that I'm writing is what we really have at the Firearms Ownership Public Safety Nexus is we've got the Chinese finger luck because you have competing mythologies. And the truth inside of each mythology is helpful, but the bullshit inside of each mythology is keeping us from going forward. And that's why we're stuck. And then, of course, part of this is much of suicide and homicide is insoluble, or not much of it. A good percentage of it is insoluble, which no one ever talks about.
Right. In fact, if you say that, you instantly become a terrible person for accepting something about, like, what if I said, well, no one gets out alive. We're all going to die of something. Like, no one would say, like, oh, I can't believe you're such a fatalist, but about this, they somehow think like you're a terrible person. You've accepted something that shouldn't be accepted, and not actually having heard that what you're trying to do is minimize it, and accepting it as part of understanding how to minimize it, instead of having this, extreme and fundamentalist belief that you can really double down on, but which may not actually make a difference and make it better. But boy, I feel better because I'm doubling down on it. See, I think what's coming clear to me, and I really appreciate this conversation because it helps me understand not just the gun issue better, but part of why even modern, liberal, scientific thinking people are attracted to fundamentalist kind of religions and to those mythologies. Like, why is that? What's the deeper psychology? And I think there's two halves to it I want to try to articulate. One is the wrongness of the law itself. In other words, like what I talked about before, if we keep this law, bad things will happen. It's not a good law. And then the other half of it is, what is the motivation for people to keep the law? Even if it's a good law, like a lot of Jews don't keep kosher. It's the law. Everybody knows it. If you ask anybody, it's like the thing everybody would know about Jews is, well, Jews keep kosher, but many Jews do not. Why not? Like, where's the incentive? Where's the disincentive in a law? Laws ultimately are about incentives and disincentives. And keeping kosher, what's the incentive fewer choices. Like, like you have to, there's negative motivations and positive motivations. And sometimes leniencies and stringencies in the application of law work together to provide a better communal incentive than like the stick, the ban, the hardship of the legal conviction. And so I think in the Jewish world, and in the religious world writ large, you have these fundamentalists, and they say, if you just do this commandment and you do these sets of things, you pray X times a day in such a way and face in this way, you will heal the cosmos and everything will be fine, right? It's literally, we'll stop mass shooting. It's the end of the problem. The cosmos will be healed. Human redemption will come about if you do these things, right? That's the wrong law. That's not true. Then the question is, well, then why should I? What is my motive? And I return to our motive for having smart laws, good laws, one that actually function and actually support the non-legal civilizing factors that are, equally important in the stability of a society. Then instead of the motivation being fear of punishment or or some mythical utopia that you can't achieve, then the motivation is, I'm building a better society. I'm creating a better world. Things are not going to be perfect. They're going to be better. And I wish that better were more appealing than perfect. But the only way to make it more appealing is to make it more appealing, is to have these conversations, to share with people that partial truth is better than fundamentalism, that a willing following of the law because it makes sense and leads to a better society is better than broad stroke laws that just punish and expect you to believe in their effectiveness even when they're not effective. I just think ultimately that's the better way to a better society. And it does require, here's a myth that it does require. It requires the myth of the improvement of the human condition over time. We have to believe that the human condition can improve over time, that our understanding, our spirituality, our consciousness can evolve and get better. And we have to really believe that. And then we have to work on our small corner of making it better.
Yeah. You said that it's surprising to you, not surprising to you, but you just pointed out that many intellectual liberals, socially active, rational liberals are super susceptible to the religious part of the brain, right? And so I have been saying that for a bit. As much as I believe in the importance of the use of policy, social progress, leveraging when we can, if it's realistic, any kind of social progress that we can through regulatory concepts. I believe in those things. And I think the 1960s gave us a boost and showed us what can happen when you use those things appropriately, along with that which is already happening within people. You put those two things together and you got a sort of a new bedrock or a new paradigm. So you can't go back, right? The conservatives they're just going to forever try to go back, right? But we know that they're not going to be able to because of the 60s. But because we had that success, now we have 100% a bona fide religion of the left in America. And that religion is the people that believe in God are bullshit, but we're going to put policy making in God's spot and have crazy fucking make 'em up beliefs about what policy can do and does do. And
there's a priesthood of that. Yeah.
And there is likely at this point trillions of dollars, but it's high billions, hundreds of billions that build this church. And it's not the church of policy can help us in some places. Sometimes it's context dependent. It's got to be great policy. It's got to be long-term. We really have to be excellent at this policy. Or regulatory schemes that really are a samurai sword and are really based in some real motherfuckers and their thinking, right? That's not what we have. We have a different mechanism that deals with law and policy at the level of religion and half-ass effectiveness, most people don't know. We know the effects of less than 1% of all policy in existence.
Right.
We know the effects of it. We know less than 1%. When evidence is involved in policy making, if you take all of the things that are involved in policy making by policymakers, the use of evidence by the policymakers is no greater than 2% of all of the things used to consider the policy. 2%.
Yeah, what a different set of policies you would get if policymakers actually knew and understood the arena in which they were making policy. Like I feel like that is true a lot less often than it's not true. I mean, it just and you hear about it in the gun world, but I am sure it's true in other worlds too, where people are, where people who are introducing and passing and talking about legislation, not only do they have no evidence of the legislation being effective, they have no clue what they're talking about when it comes to guns. Zero. And so, how could you possibly make good legislation? How could it possibly be the right set of incentives and disincentives? How could it possibly lead to greater social cohesion and movement forward if you can't even explain it, like, to a fifth grader? I mean, it's astonishing, the level of belief and then the defending of the belief. Again, like, not only am I a true believer, but I'm going to defend my true believing no matter what.
Right. It's, again, back to the part of the brain. Let's go back to the other thing that I have been studying for years. And there's a reason why I did anthropology first and law second. And that is because I think that evolutionary psychology, as imperfect as it is, really gives us a lot to understand the human dynamics, hardwiring and software that we have. So again, if you are a group in Africa, and this is 300,000, 200,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, the groups that have confidence and can create comfort within their people are the groups that will succeed. The groups that are neurotic and berserker and anxious and uncertain are the groups that die. So this is prior to, although we did have smarts back then, we didn't have this level of smart. We didn't have this level of complexity to our smarts. So this psycho-emotional wisdom and patterns, this is really deep inside of us. We succeed if we can be confident and if we can comfort one another about chaos and the future. And those two things matter more than facts in the short term. The problem is if you don't also get good with facts, comfort and confidence is not going to be enough. Specifically confidence, see MAGA and Donald Trump for the example there, right? Or Hitler, or whoever. You can't just run on it.
Right. It's a con game because that is so strong, that desire for that confidence that people will, sell their life savings to send to the guy. Send it today. I, guaranteed a place in heaven. We will make America great again. I mean, those are religious expressions of belief. They're irrational. In the scientific meaning of irrational, they're driven by emotions, not by rational thinking. And we're easily led by our emotions. And in some ways, the one who makes the better emotional case often wins the public debate. How can you be against save the children? That's why everybody's like, it's all about the children, right? Like, isn't that amazing? These crazy right-wing moms who are all about, like, pedophilia in the pizza factory, and all these crazy left-wing moms who are all about the guns in the schools. I'm like, you two should get together. You have the exact same philosophy. Save the children, panic, everybody go crazy. I'm like, geez Louise, most children are never exposed to either one of those things. Like, everybody, but then the rational person becomes demonized. How can you talk rationally when when I'm talking about the slaughter of children. Like it's an inappropriate response. If I make
Yeah. We live in, sorry, go ahead.
no, I'm making this big emotional amplitude noise over here, and you're responding, with an even keeled approach. Like suddenly I'm the one who's, off kilter and off balance.
Yeah. And I think it's so deep because, the chimpanzees don't, when it's settled that there's an alpha, there will be challenges. But generally, once it's settled, the chimpanzees are like, that is in charge. I don't want to see another one of us stepping out from groupthink. I will do whatever I can to beat you back into where the group. The big one over there that's proven, he's the one. We're not getting into this shit.
Right.
So I don't want you stepping above. Right. And so when you do what you just described is chimpanzee band behavior and dynamics 101. That's what that is. Right. And again, we have a religion that's on the left. Like, generally speaking, because these awful things have happened in the world, slavery, the Holocaust, terrible. Right. Because of that, we need to just commit ourselves to the full-on emotion and groupthink that we are involved in here, and that is basically what we have. No one, or barely, people don't want to stop and go, hold on a second. What if there's something true about the law or policy that's factual, which is it is not a vehicle that can really make it up that mountain. We do want to make it up that mountain, but that vehicle is not. That's a Chevy Chevette. There's a dirt road going all the way up to the top of that mountain. That Chevette can't make it up the fucking mountain. We also want to make it up the mountain, but you guys are going Chevy Chevette when people are doing policy. That's what they're saying. Chevy Chevette. And so no one in our culture is looking to discover this fundamental fact because of the mythology of laws and policies are how you do it. You do it with laws and policies. You do it. You throw a law at it. You do it in a policy. And if you don't believe in Chevy Chevette, you're a bigot. You're whatever.
Right. And
you're in the way.
It is the myth that is being peddled there is that these legislations, these declarations from on high will change the behavior and will give us a measure of control over what is essentially, an uncontrolled reality of life. And it is true. This is the part, 50% true is 100% wrong. And so the half of that's true is it is in our benefit to try and have control over variables in life. That is beneficial for communities. Like you said, the survival is if you know the bad weather is coming and you can get inside and you can control for some variables, that's good. But there is a point in trying to control all the variables where you actually start to introduce more variables and you actually start to become less adaptable when the variables change. Equally important is the ability to set aside what you know in the control and go with the flow. Stop paddling and allow the river to take you. That is also often the right way to go. And I feel like, especially with legislation, like, is there anything that isn't illegal? Is there any human being on the planet who actually is following all the laws? There's such an unbelievable heaping of efforts to try and control all the variables that we have become incapable of adapting to the changing variables. And now we've boxed ourselves into this punishment model of behavior and of thinking where everybody is guilty of something and nobody is actually solving the problems. They're just finding other people guilty of something.